All right, the time is 4:30 and we will call the meeting of the Board of Commissioners for Skagit PUD to order for April 23rd, 2024, and ask that you join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so this time I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 4.
So moved.
I have a quick question, or I'd like to, for discussion, I guess this could also be a part of the first quarterly financials regarding what's remaining on the Drift Myers contract. I saw another $132,000 for doing vouchers. Just wondering where we're at with that contract.
Okay. Don't know if we'll be able to get an update by the financial, but I can quick look.
Happy to second, but just would like an update on that.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, consent agenda is adopted. With that, we're going to go into SKAGITNET financials.
Commissioners, good to see you all again. Oh, are we going to put them up? Shall I hand out my breaking protocol to approach the bench?
We can put it up so for others to see, but yeah, we can hand out.
I would love a paper copy if
Yeah.
you would mind. Thank you so much.
Hang on. That breaking protocol.
Good company. Thank you.
Okay, these are preliminary year-end 2023 financials. But they've been well scrubbed, so I don't anticipate changes. I know our teams are finishing up the annual report. We'll go into the state auditor here by the end of next month. So the news with respect to our performance in 2023 is good. We're favorable to budget, a little over 50,000. This was the last year we were anticipating running in the red as we grow our revenues and grow out. Significant things to take a look at on the P&L statement. You'll see about $248,000 both on revenue, and then it's balanced down on expenses below. And those are flow-through grants that Skagit County issued to SKAGITNET to build the initial backbone project. The port carries the contract on that. We pay for the project, and so we are reimbursed out of SKAGITNET after the county pays SKAGITNET. So complex little mousetrap we built. The revenues are right on target for our dark fiber lease fees, just about what we expected, a little over 140,000 this year and growing. Business and occupation taxes came in a lot lower. We have, those were taxes, that's a new determination by the Department of Revenue that we need to collect those taxes and now passing them through to the customers. And so there's a policy conversation there about burdening municipal networks with taxation, but I won't get into that today. We are passing it through to the customer for now, and so it's not burdening the budget of SKAGITNET anymore. Our staffing costs this year were outside services consulting. Joe Correa is with me today. Came in under budget on that a little bit. Network management, we had a network management contract with Petrichor Broadband, which we canceled in Q1 of 2023. Just because of our own business practice changes, it became apparent that we could handle it ourselves and save some money. And so we made that decision. Pole attachment fees are well under what we budgeted. No, boy, I just took out the little spot there. There we go. Okay, not gonna happen again. NOAANET HUD fees right on target. Mount Vernon, if you keep moving down to the MV buffer tube fee, we have paid that fee to the city of Mount Vernon to access dark fiber from City Hall to the bridge to connect the fiber that we own through Burlington and going out to the port. We have planned to discontinue that fiber because of changes in the business practice, using the backbone of some of our providers instead. But we've actually found some good uses for that fiber in the last year and are generating some good revenue on it. So we are carrying it as an expense this year. And you should see some revenue coming reflected in our dark fiber revenue for next year from that. Scanning down, let's see, travel, that just goes with the expenses that came under. Everything else is pretty well in tolerance with what we expected. So like I said, we're under budget, a little over 50,000, which is cool. And then there is a balance sheet here at the end, total equity, total liabilities and equity, assets, liabilities and equity of 116,000 and some change. So we have about $96,000 in the bank, and we're off and running, kind of growing our little baby enterprise here. So that's the end of year 2023 financial report. Just to give you a quick snapshot of everything else happening with broadband right now. We continue to work forward on the Fur Island project, fiber to the home, Bow outlying area, fiber to the home, and the Soxhawtla fiber to the home. We're also working with the Upper Skagit tribe on connecting through the Swift Center to Helmick Road into their facility there. So all those projects are grant funded. They're all in play. We anticipate Fur Island will be built this year. It's possible that Soxhawtla will also be built this year. Bow Edison probably early next year, just a bigger project with a little more entitlement work. And then the next thing we're working toward is the federal BEAD funding. And Joe, you want to share a little bit about where we are with BEAD funding? Sure. Questions on financials? Oh, do we have just a few minutes to talk BEAD funding and where we're at with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a little handout on that too. Is that okay? Right. Commissioner, you like paper? So do
I like both, but
So
I can't read that far away. And
well, we've all met before, but my name is Joe Perret and I'm working with the board on the broadband projects. And Sarah just told you a little bit on where we are in the grants that are underway. On the second page of this little report, you can see a little outline that shows that we have approximately 6,885 underserved and unserved premises in Skagit County. That number is going to go down a little bit. We're in the middle of a process right now called a challenge availability process, where you can go out onto a state portal at the broadband office. And let's say you live out in the country and it says that you're receiving broadband service, but you're really not. You could challenge that to make your address accurate. What I've noticed on that mapping is the challenges, the providers are actually getting more detailed and showing more people have service. So we're probably going to see that number go down a little bit. The grants and the number of homes and premises in those grants are listed right below that Sarah just talked about. So in the state of Washington is going to receive $1.245 billion. And the state legislature is going to put up a $300 million net for that. So we're going to have about $1.5 billion. Any public entity, for instance, the port or SKAGITNET or the PUD here even, could apply for that 25% match money to do these broadband projects in Skagit County. So we're estimating that we're going to receive $31,700,000 in BEAD funds, and 25% match would be about another $8 million. So we're going to get about $40 million into Skagit County starting this September when the application process starts. We have 5 project areas in Skagit County. Each one has a little over 1,000 broadband serviceable locations in the project area. What that works out to is about $5,800 a home passed. And then if you look at the little charts of the project areas, the Excel spreadsheet charts, I did 3 different models for each project area. And the first model hooks fiber up on the left. If you take project area 213, it hooks fiber up to
every home that's within 600 feet of what would be the main line if you were to design a network. And the second project expands out to hook up everyone that's within 800 feet of the main line. And then the third is if we were to run fiber to every home. And because we're hooking up and trying to get service to the people that are rural and the farthest out there that have never had broadband service, you can see the project would jump from a $7 million cost to just a $30 million cost for just one project area. So we're not going to be able to serve everyone with fiber. We're going to have to use different technologies and find the balance, because we're going to have about $40 million. And if you were to add up all 5 project areas, we need $150 million to run fiber to everyone. So it's going to be a combination of fiber and wireless technologies to reach everyone. A few weeks from now, we're going to put out a solicitation qualifications for providers that are interested in partnering with us. Hopefully they will bring additional match money. That's the way this program is set up. And we'll have some public-private partnerships. We'll stretch these dollars even farther and be able to reach more homes. On the back page is, for your reference, is a timeline for this whole project and how it's going to unfold. So we expect the notice of financial offering to happen this summer, applications in September, and maybe by December, awards of contracts. We have 4 years to construct. Thanks.
Very good.
George, you said that wireless is like can be a part of the project. It's not
Correct.
exempted or excluded.
No,
Okay.
if it's licensed fixed wireless, and I think we're going to see a real role for that in a lot of areas, because a home that might be $30,000 to reach by fiber might be $3,000 to reach by wireless.
But it will be approved for match funding and BEAD funding.
Correct.
Like
If it's licensed
if
fixed
it's
wireless.
licensed.
So a lot of the traditional wireless services in the valley that you've seen internet provided the last 20 years, a lot of that is in unlicensed frequencies. So, you know, if you're providing a service and then I come into the market, we just degrade each other's services. We walk on top of each other. They're eliminating that from happening by having licensed providers.
And as far as it being on, like, the financials of being granted that money, when will you know? When will you know the dollar amount that actually does come to county? And then when the port applies for, or when SKAGITNET applies for these many homes to be serviced, how will you know how much you're actually granted based on your project scope? Or how does that process work?
I'm going to defer to Joe on that, but want to preamble a tiny bit. The Port of Skagit Commission is still debating how much we want to participate in this next round of federal funding. This is a big deal. It's much more suited to retail service providers. That's what this funding is really geared towards. But because the state matching funds are so substantial and they can only go to a public entity, I think we're feeling that we really probably owe it to the community to try to bring that extra funding in, but we'll be looking for a private partner. So, we would be involved in the construction, but at the operation and maintenance and long-term operation of the system, we want to push that to the private sector. So, but to answer your question specifically.
Yeah, and thanks for adding that. To digress a little, one of the things that's allowed in this is performance bonds. So, and you can pay for them out of the grant. So if public entities do get involved, we can protect the risk here for the performance. So to answer your question, we don't know, because the broadband office needs to tell us. So the state of Washington has been, they're the eligible entity that receives the funds from the federal government, then the state broadband office through the Department of Commerce distributes them. They have to do two things. They have to get through this challenge process that's going on right now and lock down the map and the project areas. And they have to establish a high cost threshold. which in the US Treasury rules, that's a responsibility of the states. So if I think that number is going to be based on nothing, I think that number is going to be about $16,000 a home pass, meaning as you get out there and you start going up above those numbers, you're supposed to find another technology. You know, you cannot turn in an application like you can see on that bar graph. If we did fiber to the home, you can't turn in an application for a project area for $45 million when your county's supposed to get $31 million. You still have 4 project areas to go. You're supposed to seek those private sector partners, like Sarah talked about. They're supposed to provide the 25% match, further stretching the federal money. And you're supposed to choose the right technologies. That doesn't really answer your question, but they haven't locked those parameters. I think that's going to be in July. They're going to put the notice of financial offering out in July, and then we're going to have 90 days to applications.
When would be the earliest construction start date?
Oh, somewhere in 25. After
Probably not early.
after you turn all your applications in, the federal government needs to bundle all that together. There's a 125 project areas in Washington State. Send it off to the National Telecommunications Infrastructure Act, the NTIA. Get it all approved by the federal government. Then it has to come back to the state. Then they have to issue contracts. And each project area is a separate project. So in Skagit County, there could be 5 applications. The second highest number of unserved people in the state is Snohomish County, right below us, with 18 project areas. The highest is Spokane County with 24 project areas. They have 19,000 unserved people in Spokane. So whoever tackles that's going to do 14 or 19 project applications with multiple providers. So I think it's going to take them 6 months to a year to issue the contracts.
So as you're forming these applications, once you have your private partner, then you're able to figure out based on the dollar per service location, you know, what technologies are we going to be proposing for which people we're servicing based on that dollar figure of X amount of dollars.
That's a really astute way to put it. Yeah. So I ran all this with software model that uses assumptions like road miles to come up with these construction costs. Your county commissioners have funded the effort where we're working with outside plant designers right now. We're going to design all of these project areas. And then when we do our statement of qualifications with the providers, we're going to bring that engineering into the conversation and go, this is what we think. What do you think? Bring your engineers, and we're going to hone it down. So we've got it locked before the application process even starts. Because I think if you started on that statement that you just made, the day the NOFO dropped, you wouldn't make it.
You didn't have enough time.
You wouldn't make it to doing an application.
So you're kind of making it based on an assumption. Your best guess, like you said, so many dollars per home is what they're going to land on.
Yeah, we've been modeling it for a year. As they keep changing the numbers, we keep changing.
These applications have to be fairly engineered in order to submit. It's just the way that
They have to be certified, not stamped. They have to be certified by an engineer that the network will operate inside the specifications in the NOFO.
So it should be very dialed in by the time we apply. Joe just mentioned something worth noting. Skagit County Commission has granted $100,000 from ARPA funding to support this speed preparation effort, which is really phenomenal.
It's phenomenal.
It's really wonderful. This is a huge effort.
There are counties out there that are just wondering what they're going to do today.
And we may not be applying for, we could apply for any or all of those 5 areas. We don't have to apply for all of them. Private entities may apply separate and not want our partnership. Those are unknowns that we'll sort out in the application process.
So like you said, the match state fundings where you kind of the edge, you partner with us, you have more likely to have access to this other $50 million, $500 million, whatever it is.
I think it kind of under that heading of the duty and obligation that we have, and I say we collectively, SKAGITNET, to sort of carry this banner for broadband in the county. We don't know who will apply, so we want to make sure that areas don't get left out and nobody applies. That we can be there to fill that gap if there isn't a private applicant. So, yeah, and this is really the opportunity to fill the remaining gaps in the mosaic around the county. That we've got RDOF funding covering a lot of those extreme rural areas in eastern Skagit County. And we have all of these pots of state funding that are kind of creating a mosaic of service around the county. And this really should drop down and cover those gaps. So we're hoping, and I'm sure your district will have a lot of that in that area.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so with that, we will move on to our own financial update.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, commissioners. This is the first quarter financial report for 2024. I'll be brief. At the end of March, we had just over $38 million of invested reserves, just under 30 million of general revenue, just under 6 million of system development fee revenue. That's for board approved projects that enhance or expand our system. And then in debt service, we have $2.8 million. We have two large debt payments coming up, June 1st and July 1st, which are about $2.2 million. So that money is just accrued and then will be spent in the next coming months. We invest most of that money with the state LGIP. This graph shows you 2 years of returns. Back in 2 years ago, March 2022, we were at 0.25 interest. The Fed raised rates all last year. We're up over 5%, and we earned 5.4% for March of this year. So we continue to have a good return on our investments, which helps our bottom line for the district. You can see the consumption for the first 3 months of the year. For January, we compared pretty comparable to the prior 3 years. February, we started trending up, and in March, we're much higher. We did have that freeze activity. We're assuming that a lot of the consumption pertains to people trying to prevent their pipe from freezing, letting the trickle go on. We're up 8.6% for the first quarter year over year. So it's a significant increase. And I also want to point out that this is without Fidalgo. So we're 750 customers less. And we're still 8.6% higher than last year. So people are using water. It's been dry. More recently, it's been dry, but even myself, it's been dry. So I think that's also part of it. On the revenue comparison for the similar time period, you see it trends just the same as the consumption, just a little bit higher. For the first 3 months, we're about 9.4% higher in revenue. So we had 8.6 of consumption and 5% increase in rates. It's about 9.4%. In dollars and cents, it's $7.6 million. You can see that we're above in all categories, 9% higher than last year, 107% of the anticipated budget for the first quarter. So we are trending ahead of that. Our largest increase was here in commercial, government, and agricultural. So all of the commercial accounts up about 12% in dollars. So the resale, this is a larger percentage, but on very small revenues. So operating expenses, we had $4.6 million for the first quarter. That's up 15%. So that's a significant increase, but most of that is attributed to salaries and benefits in the first quarter. And this is 28% higher than last year because we have one additional pay period. So the good news is we're trending right on budget, 95% of budget. And this is an anomaly just based on the timing quarter to quarter, year over year. So that will flatten out for the rest of the year. Some of the other changes here, water treatment, most of this decrease is due to pumping, electrical costs for the Judy Reservoir. We haven't had the pumps going. We were using rain and we were working on the pumps. So we'll anticipate that that'll increase soon. Repairs and maintenance, this also includes fleet purchases, which are down from last year, but repairs, maintenance, tech, SCADA projects, all of these and professional services have more to do with timing than anything else. So we are over budget on tech SCADA equipment. Mainly, that's last year's projects that we finally got the equipment, or even 2 years ago projects that we finally got the equipment and we're able to implement. So it's a little bit of just timing on when the projects close out and when I can account for them. Goods and services is another one. When we make the purchases, what we've purchased so far, we're down year to date 12%, so that's trending well. And then utility taxes is the other one that we're actually over budget, and that just corresponds to the revenue. So our revenues are up. I increased utility taxes, but not enough for what we did in the first quarter. So we're about 10% higher than anticipated. And then on the construction, we're doing well. This is capitalized labor costs that we can apply to projects that are being done by engineering and maintenance staff. So that's trending well. Capital contributions are off to a good start this year. This is 24. The large increase is for donated plant. So these are projects that developers do and then turn over that infrastructure for us to maintain. The other one, we're off to a pretty good start for system development fees. It's higher than last year and a little bit higher than budget. So we're just under $1 million for the first quarter. I budget about $500,000 each quarter for the year. These come in at various times, just especially for developer projects, whenever we close them out and they give us the bill of sale and we can close those out. So we're trending above budget. Quick cash flow summary. You can see total revenues, that's water sales plus interest plus surplus goods, anything else that can go into that. We're at 13%, $8.7 million. Operating expenses, again, $4.6 million. Capital expenses, you can see we're at $4.4 million in the first quarter. We have a large pipe replacement project that's going, I'll show you in just a minute, and then our building, of course, and some other SCADA projects are included in that too. Debt service, this is the accrual for it, $1.2 million for the first 3 months. Income deficit, just adding that up. But you can see here, we are spending down our reserves now, and this will continue to spend down as we use those reserves to do our CIP this year and into next year. We have $41 million a year ago. We're at $38 million at the end of March for this year. Without taking any of the operations slides, this is the capital, just the highlights. First quarter capital expenditures. Again, developer projects, $600,000. The biggest one was Westland Distillery, which was finally closed out in the first quarter. Wazoo 3-inch meter. IT projects, that's one of the reasons that we saw that above budget, was for security projects and also at the raw water pump station. Some of the other big expenditures for the quarter, we've been talking about the transformer replacement project. We finally closed that one out. We spent $160,000 in the last quarter. Disinfection study, $68,000. That one's ongoing. And then the pipe replacement, we had Eagle Drive, about $800,000, and then the campus building, which goes back to your question. So I'll have to get the details on where we are in a specific contract, but they are, Comer Construction is doing about $1 million a month on construction. That we're then reimbursing or paying for that. And so the contract for the architect would be part of that. He's also doing, Mark, am I right, construction management for that. So it's not just architectural, he's doing a project. Is that? A little bit of both. Both. So that would include that for his payments that you saw. I will also say that some of the subs that they're managing came through, so some of that has to do with last year even. So they were very far behind. We were paying Lee on time, and then he got late submissions. So we continued to pay him in the current time period, but some of that goes back to last year. So that's why it was higher than normal. And he had some extra.
One of the things that they did bad because of the supply, focusing on the mental health process. be referred.
Questions, that's it. Report? All right, thank you.
All right, so with that, we will move into audience comments. Not seeing anybody in the room tonight. If you're on Zoom, raise your hand. And we will unmute your mic. Seeing nobody there, we will move on to the general manager's report.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see, I'll update on a few things that happened recently. So I was at the Waputa annual conference at SKAGITNET PUD last week, and just an update on things we learned at the conference and at the managers meeting as well. PUD Association has a bunch of contract lobbyists. I think there's 3 different ones. One of them, if you remember from Friday Facts, one of them passed away suddenly in March. So they're looking for a new contract lobbyist to try and get their stable back together. So that's one opening they have that they're looking for. They also talked about looking to hire a new policy person on their staff. So with Liz coming into the executive director position, they have some other duties and responsibilities that they need to get filled. So they're looking for a new policy person there. And I think this last conference last week was the one that George Kahn is finally saying, I'm done. I won't come to any more of your events. It's all yours. So they have to now staff up accordingly. At the meeting, so a new executive board was selected. I think you all probably got emails from people running for different positions and the such. So, you know, look at the Friday Facts from last week. You'll see who was elected. There was actually only, see, the president and vice president, there was only one person running. It was only secretary that there was actual race. So you can see who won in those in that one in Friday Facts. Things that we learned as well. So I give an update on a couple things after going to DC with the Waputa staff, and so there's an update on those. There was that PFAS exemption bill that was submitted in the Senate by somebody. So now there's also an equivalent one submitted in the House. So obviously people see that this is important to exempt water and wastewater utilities from liability. So I think that will help. EPA is saying that they won't come after water and wastewater utilities as a part of this, but it's always best to have legislation in place. So I think that's a good thing for everybody involved. And so hopefully those get passed this year. There was also a bill submitted in the House for permanent funding of LIWAP. So the water assistance program that we've used here in Skagit County, Community Action has provided a lot of our customers with LIWAP funding. And so now there's a bill submitted in the House for permanently funding that program too, which is good. So also last week, we had a number of staff attend the Washington Sewer and Water Districts Conference at Tulalip, Wazwad. Were you there? You weren't there? Okay. No. People here went, Mike and Ryan and a variety of others. Alistair was there. They said there's a lot of good speakers, good topics, a lot of educational and timely things to talk about. So there is, I think they have 2 a year, and I think the second one in the fall is in Spokane, I think somewhere. So I'll let you know when and where, but they all said that it was worthwhile, especially since it was so close. The next conference that people are going to is next week. It's the Pacific Northwest Section Conference in Spokane. And so there's a few people going there. I think Mark's going to be a moderator at one of the sessions, and then we have a top ops team competing there as well. Going to that? No? Okay.
No.
I'll just keep asking.
Hopefully September will be a little bit, we've got a lot of new operators.
Okay. Some other things related. So water rights transfers that we've been working on. So the articles are in the packet. You probably saw them. So it's drawing attention now. The applications have been submitted to Ecology for the transfers. We are in the 30-day public comment period. So we're hoping, if everything goes well, that the transfers occur by the end of May. They get authorized to occur by the end of May. So the interlocal agreements are signed, we have those in hand, but transfers are waiting for Ecology to approve the authorization, so. It's underway. And if you, I think you guys probably should have got this email as well, but the statewide drought was extended into next year, so. We didn't want to count on that for doing the authorizations, it's better to do it the way we're doing it, I think, so that's. But it's just interesting that, you know, the drought's still there. Let's see, I'll touch on one more item since Kevin's here. So we had school tours happening this week up at Judy Reservoir, and the first week in May is AWWA Drinking Water Week, and that's the week we usually hold community tours up at the reservoir and the treatment plant. So Kevin sent an email out on Monday morning, and I think within an hour, all the spots were filled up and he's got a waiting list already. So that should be an exciting event. That always gets a lot of people, a lot of interest, and people really like that, so. And then lastly, I'll be presenting at the Mount Vernon Council meeting tomorrow night. You're gonna be able to make it?
I will make it.
Okay. And that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Just on the tours, are we thinking about Kevin doing, like, inviting our local city council and doing that and trying to do that again this year?
Yeah, we want to do that this year for electeds. I didn't mention it, but our lobbyist even suggested having some of our legislators, not just locals.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be great.
yeah, we need to try and organize something probably for the fall, you know,
Okay.
after the summer holidays go through and people are more available. That's usually when it's worked the best. So, yeah, we will.
I just ran into a couple of our senators recently, and they're like, "Oh, we haven't made it up there lately."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, yeah."
We always want to invite them because they always come through for us. I didn't mention it, but the budget I don't think is approved yet. But we got support from everybody in the 39th district for a line item for funding, so. A good way to show our appreciation is to invite them up here and talk to them and take them up to the reservoir. So more to come on that, we will.
Yeah, very good. Looks like Mike's up next.
Good afternoon, everybody. Be fairly brief, not a whole lot of things have changed in the past few months, mostly stuff at the treatment plant, trying to keep the pond full. So kind of where we're at right now, we're a foot higher in the reservoir today than we were January 1st. So we kind of been holding our own despite the losses and the losses and what we're pumping and getting out of the creeks, which is good. We lost a few feet in April, but we're actually up 3 feet since the beginning of the month. So we were down to like 447 at the beginning of the month, but it's what we've taken from the streams and the SRD. Now we're back up. Replaced what we lost in April, and we're actually the same elevation as we were January 1st, which is, we're feeling pretty good about that since that's been 4 months almost, and we're having lost a lot of ground. Thankful for that. We've had some issues with the pumps. I think I discussed the last meeting or two ago with the with Pump Tech and the shaft issues that we had with the pumps. So since then, we've turned the interties on at the port out in the Fredonia area to kind of feed the Bayview and the Fredonia area with interties that are set pretty close for fire anyway. So we always have a little bit of usage in there per month, but we have since turned them up a little bit to help feed that area and take the burden off of the plant of about 1,000 to 1,500 gallons a minute. Just, it's not much, but it all helps a little bit. That's kind of a low impact area.
Are there issues with the pumps? Are those been remedied or?
Yeah, so working on it. So yeah, we had a conversation, a couple of us with Pump Tech at the Waswag conference. They happened to be there. So they are awaiting parts. Kurt and I are going tomorrow actually down to Pump Tech to discuss pumps moving forward. The pumps we have aren't, there's different materials you can put in pumps that will hold up better to the fine gritty water that we pump. But sometimes those materials like the stainless bowls and so forth aren't available in pumps that pump that high of a volume, that high of a head. So some of the materials that we have in the pumps they wear a little quicker. That's just the nature of the design. You can get some different coatings or treatments put on the impellers in the bowls. So, and the Peerless rep is going to be at Pump Tech tomorrow. So we're going to meet with them and discuss if we can make these pumps last longer. The issue that we had at the beginning of the month with the 2 brand new pumps that were put in and the coupling, we haven't hashed all that out yet. I think Pump Tech is gonna end up taking care of it and handling it, but in the meantime, they had to get new shafts. And the new shafts will be here, I think, Thursday. But we won't turn the pumps on until the 30th. This is just a graph kind of showing we've taken in from the streams, and then the SRD showing our kind of our baseline on the last few months. So the blue line being where we're at is not, we've been lower than we are now, and we've been higher than we are now, but we're not really that far out of the average range overall. But back to the pumps, we're gonna go down tomorrow and talk with them. The shafts will be here. We're gonna have to uncouple the motors, pick them up, put the new shafts in, set them back down, check rotation, pick them up, set them back down, pick them all up. That'll be on the 30th. They'll be here to do that with the crane and all that. And we won't turn the pumps on again until April 1st. So if we were to have the 2 pumps running now and bump the other 2 pumps, they would PSE would charge us back for the entire month of April on a power surcharge. So we're at this point now, we're gonna wait till May 1st and hopefully get everything fired back up again. Fingers crossed. So that's where we're at with the pumps. But looking at the graph, we're not too bad a shape. I mean, we'd love to be higher, but overall over the years, the last 5 years, we're not way far off from other times. Like I said, we've been fortunate to be kind of holding our own. The problem with not pumping a lot of water is with the elevation it is now, the temperature is starting to rise in the reservoir, and then that could potentially lead to algae issues and taste and odor and stuff like that. So we're anxious to start getting some more cold water flowing into the reservoir and help mitigate the stuff before summer hits. We were notified from Department of Health, the drinking water section is going to pay for PFAS testing for our remote systems like Rockport and Cedar Grove and Skagit Village and Alger. So I'm not sure why they're extending some monies, but we're going to take advantage of that, and they'll pay for the testing for PFAS for the small system we have.
Will they be coming and conducting it too? Because I know
I
that,
think they're just paying for the labs, I think, more than anything. I think we'll still be doing the collection, but they'll cover the lab costs and so forth. What it looks like so far. And then maintenance crew, as Mark mentioned last week or the last meeting, a lot of tie-ins going on with some of these capital projects on the west side and so forth. We did a small land clearing project, it's a treatment plant, took some trees down over a kind of a borrow area on the backside of B Dam. East-west connector there across from Costco, the guys laid some main line in there and did some pipe work in that project. Been doing ongoing maintenance for hydrants and putting in meters and regs and just kind of the overall everyday stuff. Keeping them busy. The meter, this is kind of just a quick update. They're down from the 1,400 dead down to like 100 to 150 now. Still failing at 100 to 200 a week now at this point. But Ryan, that sounds like they're able to keep up with those. And then we're still waiting for our April 1000 from Badger, the 1,000 a month we've been promised every month. Haven't showed up yet. They still have a few days. And then they're starting some proactive routes. Ryan has been working with Sharon and so forth, trying to set up some proactive routes. But right now, they're just kind of still going out and replacing the ones that are dead. They're trying to set up routes that have been red recently so they can go out and do like a street at a time instead of going here and there and setting that up. And it's been working pretty good so far. I think Brandon one guy put in 58 regs in one day the other day. So Brandon did, yeah. Yeah, pretty good. Ryan keeps pushing them all to do 100, but nobody's met that yet.
You gotta offer him something if you want him to get that.
He offered to go out and do it. He offered to go out and do it, they wouldn't let him.
No, he can't do that.
So the Gilligan Automation Project has started. I've ordered the Alma valve. It's 16 to 18 weeks out, so it's on its way. But we're waiting for a quote from QCC to get that other portion of it going, and we'll start working on that and getting that stuff put in the ground this summer. Again, we'll be doing the pump reinitializing on the 30th, and hopefully get those fired back up May 1st. And we'll try and pump 3 and possibly even 4 pumps in May, and try and make up a lot of ground in May. Get that elevation back up. As George mentioned, the transformer job is complete, and we had training today from Kevin, who did the transformer project, basically walked 4 or 5 particular crew members, the foreman at the treatment plant and the electrician, who can go out the side door of the SRD out to where the transformer is. There are certain criteria you have to be trained on to be around that industrial class transformer and the open, and Jay was there as well and watched all that happen. So the guys are safe when they go out there if the time ever arises. So yeah, that's what the shaft looked like when they bumped the pumps for about 1.5 seconds when they initialized the pump April 1st. That top shaft that goes through the motor caught that brass sleeve and things went a little haywire.
Are these the same? I mean, are they same for same, the replacement, or did with
The pumps?
Yeah.
Yeah, the pumps are the same. When they put the pumps in, they set them in the can and they basically sit clear down on the bottom of the can. They put the motors on top. They put the shafts through the motor, couple them at the base between the pump and the motor. And then you got a bump test to check the rotation before they lock down on top and set the elevation of them with the anti-ratchet device and all that on there. So when the pumps motors were put on top and those brass sleeves basically go up inside the motor, it's a hollow shaft motor. The shaft goes down inside it. It's got a hollow core in it, and that copper bronze sleeve right there goes up inside, where it used to be a packing plant. Those are machined to some tight tolerances, obviously. So they put all those together, and then they basically say, okay, you go ahead and bump test them now so you can check rotation. But then we'll come back and put the anti-ratchet on it and set the elevation. So you bump test them, and within 2 seconds, it was, like I said a couple of weeks ago, it was smoke and fire and fragments and everything else. So as we were there, we said, well, we're a little hesitant to try number 3 because number 5 just did this. The guy's like, well, it's got to be a motor problem. You go, okay, go ahead and do number 3. Bump tested number 3. Same thing happened. So then come take the motors off, set the motors to the manufacturer. They looked them all over. Motors didn't suffer any damage, thank goodness. Have those back. So now we're waiting for those top shafts to go through the motors on those bronze pieces again. Thus, we're going to put back together again next week and try it again. Hopefully with better success. Fleet, we got the new tractors showed up about a month or so ago, which we use for mowing the right of ways and the reservoirs, and the water treatment plant uses theirs for mowing, cleaning out the lagoons, forklifts for getting big totes out of the back of the trailers and trucks and so forth. We ordered them with cabs this time with the new L&I requirements of heat and safety and things like that in the summertime. If you go above a certain temperature, you have to have the guys have brakes or whatever. So these cabs are air conditioned. They're HEPA filtered and all that. So after mowing, the dust and the chaff and everything else is blowing around will keep them in a better situation. Still waiting for a dump truck quote. I should have that in a few days. There's a problem with getting, you can order a dump truck, but you can't get the frame rails from Mexico. And another truck, you can get the frame rails, but you can't get the transmission. And you get the transmission in the cab from this other company. So it's still kind of a piecemeal deal trying to get worked out. But we're trying to get something put together. Allison's like 40% behind. So what we're trying to do is get a quote so I can at least get a purchase order approved to get it ordered and get a place marked. Probably won't even show up till 2025 if we get one built, but got to get our position in there to get one. I hope I have a number here in a few days. So those are new tractors. Ordered them just a little bit bigger than the last ones because the front end with the forklift was a little bit on the edge of having enough capacity. And that one of those replaces that 1982 that we've been using since 1982. We get our use out of that. And then that's the one from the treatment plant. That's 1993. So we got lots of usage out of the ones that we have.
There's a roof over that.
Yeah, roof over that one. But just the brakes and the safety and all the different things that have evolved over the last 30 years to be a lot better position for safety and comfort and all that. So outside of that, let's get any questions.
Question on the RO plant.
Yes.
What's
the
update?
So we are in, we were talking with the consultant, just talking with Mark about this a little bit ago. We are in the process of having RH2. We gave them a criteria we're looking for. Now we're looking at 2 manufacturers US Water and Case Marine at building what we're looking for in a specific gallonage range. What we're trying to work out now is how much of the work we're gonna do versus what we have a contractor do. So we're working through the contract language right now to have them go out and get the bid solicited on what's gonna cost. How much of the work we're gonna do as the general contractor versus how much we hire out. And it changes the language into how we do the contract. But we've already gone through the thing. Brian's looked at it, I've looked at it. We're happy with the criteria that's in there for the design. So now it's kind of get the final contract details worked out, hand it back off to our H2, and they'll go out and solicit it for bid. So still in process, working on it.
I'll just say one more thing about the pumps. We haven't talked about pumps enough this week, so.
Joel, man.
Those are two pumps that we put in that had issues that we're hoping to get back installed next week. We had two pumps running. And we were gaining some ground, but then we had power outages, right? We had power outage on Saturday, and then inexplicably, we had one on Monday as well.
Yesterday, yeah.
So so much of our strategy around the SRD deals with power supply, with PSE, the rates, the surcharge, all of that. So how we're using it is different now than when we first had that pump station installed. So we need to have some conversations with PSE. So I'm starting those next week. I have a conversation with Lynn Murphy. She's our client contact there. So I'm going to start those conversations, but I think we need to look at the big picture as well, not just let's just fix what we do and operate the same way. We've got to ask if we're going to get anything different from PSE. And I think now is the time to do it because we're using this pump station a lot more than we used to. And we're going to be using it a lot more going forward.
I'm sure having a generator of that magnitude would be,
Well,
astronomically expensive.
Yeah, because to get one that puts out 4160, the phase that these motors take, the size of that thing is there's not really even one hardly even around. And the fuel to operate it would far outweigh anything electrically that we could do to upgrade that system as well. Yeah.
We need better power reliability, on PSE side.
Yeah.
And then the rates, all of it plays into each other. That we don't pump in the winter just because of how it impacts the cost. But we should be doing more of that. And so we need to talk about the cost. So just a heads up.
Yeah, talk about what elevation of the power structure or what we pay. Maybe we can negotiate a better rate or impact fee, basically. So we bump them in the wrong time of year, they charge us 60% of impact. 12 months. $500,000 a year, $250,000 a year on our budget just for electricity. So. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to revisit the water policy manual discussion for high consumption events.
Yeah, Brian's going to come up and lead us through. But yeah, it was back on the agenda at the request of the board. So it's our water policy manual section on leak adjustments. I think Brian's going to go through the same materials and the backup that he did back in 2022 that we used to discuss and base our policy on. And I think he also has updated statistics since we implemented that policy. But I worded it in here as well. The policy language that we have now, no policy is perfect. Every policy is going to have its issues. This also has them. The policy is able to be enforced at the customer service level, so that helps. You guys get called when there's large bills, and we've had somebody come and ask for relief. Take that into consideration, but we're open for discussions. We don't have any specific recommendations to make to change the policy. This is the discussion, and so feel free to discuss after Brian goes through it. There you go, discussion.
So this is mostly the information. We had this discussion in December of 21. And so we were just talking about different preventions for high consumption events, as we're calling them. When the meter crew goes out and does a read, if the meter has been running for 24 hours, it gives us a signal and a flag on the uploads from Badger meter, beacon meter. And we also, the billing clerk is looking at high use consumptions and comparing it for that particular resident, compares it to prior use. So those are the internal flags that we use every day. And then also a lot of customers are just concerned when they get their bill. And so they ask us to come out and investigate those. I will say that a lot of this is just a trend. So a lot of the times in the summer, the first month of the summer billing, everybody's water use goes up, and it's a recency issue. So our customers get a bill, it's for the prior 2 months. They can't remember that they washed their car, filled their hot tub, watered their lawn. So everybody sees that first indicator. Customer service is really good at answering questions, pointing them to possible reasons why it increased. You know, we ask these type of questions because it happens all the time and we see it. So it is a very busy time. It takes time to respond to all these. And if we can't try to help them get to an answer, we send the meter crew back out there. And so they go back out there. We're checking for accuracy. They're checking the meter. They're looking to see if the leak's going, if the people can't do that themselves. And then on the newer meters and the newer regs, the good technology that we have now, it does record, the data logger does record up to 6 months of use, which gives us the time and use for that particular meter. We don't have those in all locations yet, so but we are getting there as we're replacing them. That goes so far for people. They won't believe us. They don't remember, but we show them, you know, your water went on here and it got turned off 12 hours later. There's not much they can say after. So where we have those and when we install those, it really goes a long ways toward helping validate that they are using the water. It is going through their meter. It's just a continuous education of our customers for that. We put together, this has been around for a long time, but we try to educate people to, you know, listen for trickles, use dye tablets in their toilets, turn off the water and go look at, see if their meter, the snowflake is spinning around. All of this again is handed out. Kevin puts it in the newsletters. We also educated people ahead of the freeze to try to wrap their pipes, protect their pipes from freezing. So there is a lot of education that the district does on an ongoing basis, but it is time consuming. All this takes time for customer service to answer the questions. It gets elevated to Sharon and then to me. It goes back out to Ryan and his meter crew. So there is a lot of time involved in just answering the questions and getting them to, but also dealing with leaks. So at that time, we had a similar conversation about, you know, how we could prevent it, what we're doing currently, what do other PUDs do. At that time, there was a survey, which I included in the packet, updated from that time frame. But what do the other PUDs do? You know, account types. Should all account types be eligible for high consumption adjustments? For which portions of the sections of the service line, types of leak, irrigation hoses, water heaters, faucets, and then what kind of proof did people ask for? So I'll just say, you know, before that time period, the joke was, if you put it on a napkin and brought it to the district, we would give you a leak adjustment. And so at that time, we decided that we needed to reduce the number of leaks, not only from a cost standpoint, dollar standpoint, but from a time. We developed criteria. We put a limitation on it of, it used to just be 1 per 12-month time period. So now it's once every 5 years. And we developed that criteria mainly to help on the administration and just clarity of what would be eligible, you know, the instances. And we concentrated mainly on the types here is that this is beyond our control. This is beyond the meter box. So this is after it leaves what we've done, what the district maintains, what we installed. This could be, you know, a DIY project under their house. they put in a sprinkler system or they didn't wrap their pipes. We had a number of just watering systems on timers. The timer didn't work. It ran. So that would have been eligible in the prior to our changes for an adjustment. So those are the type of items that we were trying to eliminate. And the thing to remember on the quantity, well, I'll get to that, of those leaks is that the ratepayers are then subsidizing those people that aren't properly maintaining their pipes or their irrigation system. So what we came up with was clear criteria. This is the after the revision. So this went into effect from our December conversation, and we gave everybody 6 months notice. So it started in July of 2022. And the first one is really the key on what we're covering. And we did extend it from the meter box to the entrance into the structure. So Jay's in the room. He wanted us to stop at the meter box, and we capitulated and went all the way to the structure. But again, that's beyond what we control, what we maintain. But we did make that adjustment. We're not covering anything that branches off from that. So hose bibs, irrigation lines, second lines. If it goes to a different structure, all those are not included in the policy. And the result is evident here. This is a lot, but for 4 years, right here is July. This is where we implemented the new policy in the last 2 years here. So we were having about in 2021 and 2020, we had 328 and 194 leak adjustments for $132,000 and $100,000. It continued in 2022 for the first 6 months of the year. But in 2023, we adjusted 82 leaks for about $40,000. So the criteria was clear. It helped administer it. It did reduce the number. And we also put in a limit of $1,000 before we would get credit for the entire amount. So since that time, the few people that have had very large consumption events have contacted some of the board members. We had one gentleman came to a meeting for his neighbor, and I think that's what we're revisiting tonight. We have good criteria, I think. We looked at what other PUDs are doing in the city of Bellingham and the city of Anacortes, which I'll talk about in a minute. We're confident of what we're doing with our equipment and how we investigate them and what the definition of it is. What it comes down to at the end is, you know, there's been a few just hardship cases. They couldn't hear, they didn't know, they couldn't get under their house. Again, under the criteria, those didn't meet eligibility, but they are raising the question on, is there anything that can do as a form of relief? One thing we want to point out is that there are a few insurance policies, homeowners policies that do cover it. Not every policy does, but that would be one point that we would want to make sure that people are using every avenue. We mentioned community action too as a source of relief, and then we could change or broaden the definition of what is undetectable or unknown, if that would be something that we would be interested in doing. It's not my first recommendation or priority, because I think that it's just subjective that we've got good criteria. It's clear for the people. It really helps in the administration of it. And if we just start asking the question, you know, does this qualify or this doesn't qualify? The other thing is what other PUDs do is there's some reduced rate for the water that was actually used. And so our cost structure is incremental, and then it goes back down. Other PUDs, it just continues up. So some PUDs just bill at their tier 1. It wouldn't make that much different for us. A lot of them are only in that tier 1, unless it's a very large one. And then one thing that we are doing, so people that don't qualify, but it is unusually large, we are giving payment arrangements. So we're giving up to a year on payment arrangements. So we look at what their normal rate is, how much this event is, and then we'll try to work with them as far as working on to help pay that back. So those are things that we're already doing. But for now, you know, we brought back the information for discussion purposes, and would be happy to answer any questions. Sharon's here too, but she might be able to answer other questions too. But the statistics, what we don't have is the number that aren't qualifying, because we don't track that. We can tell you how many there are historically and logically conclude that that's probably how many aren't being qualified now, but that's one thing that we might do in the future. So that's I don't know. George, did I cover most things?
You mentioned Bellingham and Cordes.
Yeah. So I did contact Bellingham and Anacortes to see what their policy was. Bellingham, it's actually bookends from where we were and what we're doing now. Anacortes is very lenient. They do look at each and every one and will make adjustments based on just higher use and consumption, which is kind of where we were here at the district. And Bellingham is as conservative as us, except they only do it every 10 years. So they actually have one more criteria on it. I don't think that they limit it to only residential, so I'd have to double check on that. So there's trade-offs there, but I think with the Waputis survey there, you can see that most people are pushing it onto them to maintain, the customers to maintain their side of it. There is some relief and some differences on how they might bill for that water, but most people are doing very similar things to what we're doing.
Yeah, I think my biggest concerns were the outliers. You know, the very first week I think I was here, there was like a $8,000 one from a former employee's father or something.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, there was another one and another one. And this most recent one that someone actually came in person, that was more of a hardship on top of disability and all of that. And it's how do we ensure that, I mean, the payment plan, it's a big benefit.
Helps.
But yeah, I wasn't here for that discussion, and we never get to talk about things unless we're here in front of everyone. So just kind of see where you guys landed on this and the background. I do think we found a really good middle ground as far as every 5 years. I think that's very fair. The only thing that I had questions on was account versus property. Because I did read in a few different ones, they said account will only be made once every 5 years per account versus how ours is kind of to the property itself. So just the differentiation between that.
Yeah.
And I understand it, because if you have a rental and you have new people coming through a rental, and if the renter is paying, not the owner of the home, it leads to negligence on their end. So.
Yeah, and rentals are a good topic too. So we're often in between the landlord and the tenant, and we don't want to be there. So I think the goal of ours, and I think others, is that we want it to be fixed. So that's another requirement, is that we're not going to give any sort of, we don't really want to even look at it until we know that it's been fixed. So that might take waiting for the whole billing cycle. But oftentimes that's kind of the in between. The tenant's calling us for immediate relief, and we are saying you need to work with your landlord. This is a landlord issue, and you need to be working with them. And that's where the relief should come from, not from us. So I think that's the idea about limiting it to the property, so that puts that on them, and that they're hopefully then responsible for it. And next year, if it wasn't just wrapping the pipes, you know, the landlord needs to be there and making sure that their tenant is wrapping the pipes, or whoever is responsible. So, I would say that your first one, that your example was, you know, that was a good example of, yes, there was a leak on our side of the meter and their meter, but we had also notified them that it looked like there was a high use, and then the months went by before it became really high use. So there is some notification, and some times that not everybody takes action on that notification. So That's kind of the rest of the story on that one. Very well.
I guess Pete had mentioned maybe some kind of hardship clause in there.
Yeah,
I mean, you want to just kind of maybe talk about how that would work, because the two, I've only really heard of the two. Sounds like you've heard,
There was one
You've got
additional
two
one
more.
when I first came on,
but
but
there
that
was
was,
the lady that couldn't really get under the house or whatever, and then.
Yeah, I think one, those two
The
are the
other
most
guy.
recent ones and the largest one. So one was a person that couldn't get under there and identify it and then fix it. And then the other one is the neighbor came over and fixed it for him. So I think that's where we are. I will say both of them paid. We will offer and have offered to do payment plans if it continues. The one is waiting for a response if any action is taken, and I've said that it's up to the board to take action on that, and I don't know when that'll be. So all of them have been paid at this point. So
so you just have to be a little bit careful with drawing a clause like ownership clause or a discretionary clause, because once you get outside of the black and white structure of the policy, you're inviting problems or you're inviting something like that. You might also be inviting liability if you're sued on it. You can't do anything arbitrary and capricious, so you have to follow your policy. And if you don't follow your policy in a particular area, you have to be able to justify what you did. So it is, I mean, writing a clause like that can be opening a can of worms unless it's done really precise. That we can work on it. I'm curious what Anacortes does on that. It sounds like they're lenient. I don't know whether that's because they essentially leave it to their own discretion to, on a case by case basis. Sounds good, but it's also potentially problematic. Because are you doing it consistently over time? And why one person done?
yeah, their municipal code is very vague. It is very
Yeah, we went to look online, comparing Bellingham and of course, Bellingham has a code written,
Yeah.
all detailed, and of course doesn't have a policy.
And
There's no policy.
departments may approve requests for refunds or credits for service paid but not used to to over $1,000 per payee per year.
Yeah.
That-
it's just-
And it doesn't say anything about water. This isn't regarding water
Yeah.
or anything. It just is refunds and credit.
It would be nice to be able to provide some relief to somebody, like in this last example where the gal could not hear the leaking water, ran up a huge bill. We'd love to be able to do something to accommodate that, just out of a sense of fairness, to do that without, within the language of the policy. Sure. Question.
I can't remember what my other question was.
Like you mentioned consistency, Pete, right? Oh, did you remember?
Yeah, so when we talk about they can appeal to the board, was that his appeal, or is that something that we would put on the agenda to deal with?
well, we give both options.
Yeah.
So if it's gone through all of the steps through me and I notify George, we always say you can come to the board and at any meeting. If it's a formal appeal, Nick, the gentleman that came, is the closest it's come. Most people opt not to show up at the board. That's what's happened so far. The formal appeal process is actually to be put on the agenda, and that would be scheduled with George and then with the board at an upcoming meeting.
All right.
So,
And we've offered that to a few people. One person wanted to do it
Yep.
and then just quit responding. But yeah, that would be a separate.
To Pete's point, I would almost like to establish the parameters for a hardship just in terms of being defensible, where we would say we'd say it's a sliding scale based on hardship. We'll be able to say, here are the factors that we would consider, and then it's not arbitrary capricious. Are you on a fixed income? Do you have limited mobility? Are there, and therein lies our relatively agile yet identifiable set of criteria upon which we can make a decision on hardship. As opposed to, well, we feel sorry. for
And
this
that would come
person,
to the board.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we just look at it and say, George.
The board will consider.
Kevin, can you score this for us? Or we could say out of the 4 or 5 elements that we would consider that feed a hardship waiver, it's a 3.7 out of 5, based on what and that would create some kind of a non-emotional
yeah,
type scale. We would say, okay, if they're on the fixed income, that's 2 points, or we could work that out ahead of time, or not. We could say, yeah, this person is not. It's clearly. And did they show up in the meeting? Did they, there's a process where it's important enough for them to, it's not a fire and forget email and expect, us to bend over and backwards to help them. I think that's at least.
That's to me
defensible.
sounds like,
Defensible, I'm looking in the back of the room because Sharon's here. The Brian explains the process just to get to the bill of, hey, you got a large leak. There's a lot of time consumed there. This just raises my flag of this is gonna take, it's gonna be hard to be consistent with everybody, and it's gonna, I don't know who it would land on, whether it's Sharon or Brian or me.
well, I would
It's
say
gonna
once it
take a-
gets to the level where it's gone to Brian. And this person's,
Well, you just look at, is it
No,
more than
no.
$5,000? Is it more, is payment an option? If they're like payment plan's not an option, fixed income, limited mobility, or any of the other criteria that it might just. It may just be a run the checklist, add it up, send it to the board as a factor. And it's not cut and dry, but at least we will say, here are the factors that we've accounted for. And they're non-emotional, and score it and decide. And then kick it back that's. In terms of discretion, which we're never going to create the perfect policy for, we say.
Yeah, that's hard.
When the reason for the rule doesn't apply, only a fool applies the rule. But what we're trying to do is say, here are the exceptions that we have accounted for ahead of time. To be able to say, and yes, it may be, and without creating a whole bunch, Sharon might be able to just. Here's of the 10, they hit 3, but they're really important. Or they're weighted differently. I think those are the ones for me. It's fixed income, limited mobility, some of those ones where it's just like this could be is it life-changingly difficult for that person? That qualifies as a hardship. Like they're not going to eat because they got to pay their water bill for which they were then yeah, I think we want to hear about it.
I think I mentioned this last. Somewhere in there, we should have the language new or should have. So on whether you knew or should have known that the leak was on your end of this. And somebody like the person who couldn't hear would be able to say, well, I couldn't have known because of my disability. Back that up, that may be a way, just walk them through our ordinary policy on it. They either qualify or they don't. If they don't qualify, then they appeal formally to you guys. Then I think you guys have to have your own set of standards for how you're going to adjudicate those appeals. I agree.
I think that's been my biggest concern is once they do come in front of us, what are we, I mean,
Yeah, it can't just be
we can't,
fair discretion.
yeah.
That's just out of trouble.
And that's my concern is that we get people, they go through I'm shocked, we've only had one person, but you get to that podium and then, well, I can't just be, don't pull my heartstrings. I mean, I understand. Did you know? Did you not know? I mean, can you eat? Can you not eat? I don't know what criteria am I supposed to be evaluating to protect the PUD from decisions I'm making up here? That's another element of my concern with the policy is that, yes, come and appeal to the commissioners and they'll say something to you. Okay, well, what am I gonna say?
well, and I feel like when somebody's been told to appeal to the commissioners, they haven't really done it yet, so.
Yeah.
Outside of the one.
It's a fear factor, I think.
Yes, we're
It's very
Yeah.
Well, I think part of it is that they're getting consistent responses all the way up from
Yeah.
the CSRs, to Sharon, to Brian, to me, and you guys are even reciting the policy as well. But when they get that consistent message, I think it forces them to ask themselves these questions. Well,
Do we have a
Can I do
form that they would fill out to appeal to us?
Well, not an appeal form yet, but we have a form for the leak adjustment. So again, we state the policy and then we're asking for information because the first one is where the leak happened and we want to see a picture, and do it. So that's really, we want to provide the information, but also, we review that information and we don't want to mislead them either and say, oh yeah, you're going to get a leak adjustment. I'll say it right now, a majority of them don't qualify because they're toilets, they're faucets, they're under the house. And so we had a big event freeze and there was a lot of activity and a lot more people called in. And so far those have been, mostly, it's still, we work with them and try to figure out what it is. And while we're investigating, we'll not make them pay if we think that it's going to qualify. But at that point, it's usually, I think George said it best, a consistent, clear information provided at each step. And as soon as you don't, or you deviate from it, that's when you get people saying, well, what about me? Or they did it this time or something. So I think and we've improved that a lot. I mean, just in the last couple of years, I think that's the key. We gave everybody a notice ahead of time. I mean, that's why we waited to implement it too. It was like, this is a leak, but in 6 months, it's not a leak, and it won't qualify under the new policy. So we did that. So, and we also give people the option, if it's a small leak, we tell them, up front, if it's only $100, you might not want to take a leak adjustment on that.
You only get one every 5 years.
Yeah, you only get one. So make sure it's worth it, but that doesn't happen for our sorry.
The guy that came in here and on behalf of his neighbor, was that because a pipe broke when it was frozen? Like, does it go back that far?
You weren't here.
Do you know? Like, it came from, I think that one came from under his house, right? That he couldn't hear?
Nick Sassetti, yeah, Swain.
Like, I'm just trying to think, like, okay, so yeah, that person might not have been should have known or knew, but if it was prevented from on the front end, insulating pipes, running water, keeping your pipes from freezing, then that one wouldn't even technically qualify under that. So yeah, there's a lot of things, because part of it is that was probably 3-4 months after the fact of when the leak actually happened. So that one might have been a wintertime thing, yeah.
I'll have to check on that.
Curious.
Yeah.
So what would are you interested in coming up with some kind of hardship
Actually,
definition
that
criteria?
one went all the way to the bill. So he got the bill and then we were working with him and he had a caregiver involved and a phone call and hard of hearing. And then his neighbor got involved and just went over and fixed it for him. And then his neighbor is the one that came in. So it's coming back to me now. But that was a sequence of events that happened. So, and that's unfortunate that the bill sometimes is the only indication. But even if we're there 24 hours before, if you have a big leak all of a sudden and it's just wide open, it's enough. It doesn't matter if it was 2 days ago or a week ago, it was enough. But a lot of water went through in a short period of time for him. So, and he was in between. So it's the next bill that they're worried about too. So he had one that was in the $3,000 to $4,000 one, and we're waiting to see what the next bill is, which I think is coming up. So that's timely.
Do we know what the snow content is on this?
They weren't on this.
They weren't on that. They weren't on that. So
I know.
I think another part of this conversation too, as we move forward with our new rate structure, as we start talking about rates, is kind of just keeping that in the back of our minds too. If our rate structure does change, like some others that are more aggressively incremental with usage, that we do keep
Bill at the lowest rate.
Having that in our mind, because that's something I did see in a couple that I read, and I think maybe it was one of these as well.
Yep. That
it was bill at the lowest rate. And I was like, oh, okay, well, ideally you're incentivizing conservation with your billing structure, depending. And as we move forward too, I think that might be something to just, that it does impact. If we do change the rate structure, it will impact the implications of this. I would like to see what Snowpud does. I mean, and maybe a couple other fellow. I looked up Edmund, or not Edmund, Everett. And Everett's was also relatively vague. But I think their adjustment, they said one per year. That they had, and it was a half. I think they only did half of what the
Overage was.
the overage,
Yeah.
that would be, and no more than $1,000. I mean, it's similar language in that $1,000 seems to be
Yeah.
very standardized across.
What do you like to see from us?
Well, I just coming back to the hardship, like what's the defensible hardship calculus?
I believe that the city of some of the cities, if you have some sort of tax or something exemption on your, some sort of
Yeah, the senior.
senior exemption, that they provide you with a discounted rate on your utility service. Alan, I mean,
Is it the county that does that, or is it,
Cedar Woolley does it as well.
we've talked about
So
that.
that's income based or, and so if you're eligible for the county property tax exemption, it's limited to seniors and limited by
Okay.
income, and then you have to be an owner. And so, it has a pretty narrow focus, of eligible people that do that.
Okay.
I'll say, but that is a lot to manage.
Mhm.
And I don't know how the county is here for managing it. In Whatcom County, we tried to share information. And if you were eligible, you were eligible, for the city or the county, but, that even becomes hard because the RCWs are open to interpretation. I'll just tell you the example. What is income? So income, you say that, and I spent a lot of time arguing with people about, you sold your house and is that income? One-time deal. Are you hardship if you just sold your house or your business? If you don't have any other income? I mean, so you immediately get into those type of interpretations on, is it a salary or is it income or do you have assets? And so that is another thing to manage.
Yeah, I guess. To me, if they show up, I think, and I said this when we did this, if they show up to one of our meetings. Hear their story, but then I'm sitting here thinking if somebody did show up and make an appeal, are we gonna sit here and say, well, we're gonna knock 30% off and you're gonna say, no, 50, and then,
Yeah.
you know. So I think even before we get to somebody appealing to us, I think
There should be a form.
we should maybe look back at the way we use or how we discount it so that we kind of know what that might look like.
Well, like the criteria.
It's kind of a rubric, like there's spectrum of hardship, extreme, life-changingly difficult, and also like, yeah, I don't want to pay the bill and I'm gonna find a way around it. Those are the two ends, right? And so, and then we could actually sit there and say, and have it scored, but to be able to say, okay, yeah, this person does qualify across the board on what we would consider, extreme hardship in their fixed income or senior or, I just don't know what those are. It may be worth, and it may even make it easier just to sit there and say, no, without judgment, here are the hardships, and then leave the judgment to us in terms of that could create options to be able to say, okay, there's a 30%, 50%, 75% based on the number. I mean, if it's a $10,000 bill and it's extreme hardship, we can turn a discount at 75% for the one time, or if it's a $1,500 bill and it's not, it's like, well, okay, you came in, you did the work, $1,000, or it's a 30%. I know that it's just creating the agility for us, but all at the same time putting it in a box where they can't turn around and say, well, they gave that guy 30%, they got 75%. If there's an established rubric, we can have to point back to it and say, yeah, that's a responsible judgment on our part. I think if we can do it once and well, then that would inform both the staff and team to be able to cope, to be able to say, here's, you really get from issue to resolution pretty swiftly. To be able to say, and if you don't come before the commission, you get no, you need to bring your petition before the commission. And here's how to prepare for that, or whatever.
That would be one more layer of both criteria and the appeal process.
Yeah, it was
Application.
mostly
We-
an application.
We would get all that and present it to you.
Yeah,
At the same.
Well, I think just the leak adjustment packet.
right.
Yeah.
Right, and then we.
Well,
Yeah, specific, so you get to see
Right, but
the.
it creates options for
Yeah.
us to like do saying like, okay, well, now what? Do we just waive the whole thing or? You can sit and say, well, the way we scored it, or based on the recommendation of staff, like this typically this would be a 30%, or they want to use it, or this is life-changingly difficult. They're gonna, bankrupt this person if they.
And I mean, I wouldn't be encouraging people to come before us, but just, that's an option and, you know.
So if it gets to the point where they're asking for a business item on the agenda, that's when all that information would come.
Yeah.
People coming to do audience comments that's fine, that's good, but that's not
That's
raising
not
it to the level that you're talking about. Yeah. We can come up with something, some kind of a
I don't know if other utilities.
data collection. I don't think anybody else can see this.
This would be,
Based on what I saw in the
Yeah.
survey.
this would be something new with, I haven't heard any.
What are like, what about relief funds and things for like, does PFE or does CNCG, does anyone have like? I don't know, like hardship relief funds or, I mean, I don't know what those.
I think that's just the monthly stuff, the LIHEAP programs, energy assistance programs. If LIWAP goes through, they'll get that. So customer, where was community action goes through and looks at some of this criteria for the ongoing monthly bills. Not, I don't think they deal with it for a
Well,
one time.
They have helped individuals, but it all comes down to timing. So,
Okay,
you know, that program started, they had limited funds and they gave certain amount to each person. And then as they cycled through all that, and then more recently, they had funds that they were trying to utilize in
Yeah.
a short period of time. And so they became much more lenient and they actually exceeded and gave the same people more and more money more than once. And some of those people would have had a high event.
yeah,
Not necessarily they qualified, but that they just had a higher water bill. And that's sometimes hard for us to determine what it was. It was just a high event.
yeah.
But it stopped but they got more money than other people. So I don't know how the permanent one, if it's approved, would be written and if that would be an eligible expense. We always recommend that they try that. But again, there's no guarantees on the criteria and how much money they have.
Yeah, I'm not sure if any of the ones you heard from would qualify for any assistance from community action.
I guess the other thing, I want to just circle back, we're not changing the criteria. It would still only be those things that are eligible that then are coming to you for a hardship. So if someone's hose doesn't get shut off, that's not a hardship. I mean, even it might be a hardship, but it's not eligible even for this extra review. It's still the criteria that we have. It's just at the end of that criteria.
But even that break into the house with somebody being unable to hear it, that wouldn't be contempt of.
Well, it has other factors, I guess. That's what I'm saying, but we'd still use that as the initial criteria, and then we get up to it, and then it's beyond that. So I guess my hose, maybe, like you're saying, if there's extenuating circumstances, but I don't want to open it up for everybody to say, oh yeah, there's gonna be a hardship case.
No,
On,
not at
you
all.
know, I didn't take my hoses off and the timer went off all night, which has happened.
No,
We had that one.
yeah,
yeah.
I think that's at least my concern is I want to make sure it doesn't get abused, but also that there is an avenue for, and is an avenue for people who are truly experiencing hardship or physically could not have known that something was going on until they got the bill. Few and far between, but
Right.
it's worth looking into and
Continue to bring information.
yes, more
Yeah.
research.
Yeah.
But yeah, and especially as we start
Your
talking
list, I
about,
think, is the best parameters. I think we have to work on those parameters, but we can work on that with people. So. With your ideas.
thank you, Brian.
All right, so looks like we've got under new business information, Judy Reservoir data report, A couple recent news articles. Any commissioner comments this evening?
Yeah, I just want to say that I got a lot of feedback about the Mount Vernon Science Night. So thank you. I had a lot of really excited kids and families that approached me and said, we really enjoy seeing the PUD out there. And by the way, your guys' swag's the best. So that's what I heard.
All right.
That's what we strive for.
There you go. So with that, we will convene an executive session to consider the sale of real property under RCW 42.30.110, approximate time 30 to 40 minutes. Are we anticipating any action after?
No,
Okay,
so back at say 6:45.
we will reconvene at 6:45.